Drummerly.com Unlimited Drama Series.
My wife, the CEO, announced over her morning green juice, "I want a prenup. I'm not risking my future on you." I nodded, stirring my coffee with deliberate calm. Smart thinking, Claire. Really smart. What she didn't know was that I'd already had my lawyer draft one. What she really didn't know was how smart I actually was. I'm Ethan Drake, 39, and I built a logistics software company from my garage while Claire was still figuring out which MBA program would look best on her LinkedIn. But somehow, in the 5 years we've been married, I became the supportive husband while she became the power CEO. Funny how that works. Claire's company, Wellness Dynamics, sells overpriced supplements to desperate housewives. My company, Drake Logistics, actually moves real products for real businesses. But Claire's the one with the magazine interviews and the motivational speaking gigs. I'm the one who stays home with our golden retriever Max and handles the boring back-end stuff. The irony is delicious. While Claire poses for Forbes photo shoots, I'm quietly building an empire. While she networks at charity galas, I'm securing contracts with Fortune 500 companies. While she talks about disrupting industries, I'm actually doing it. Ethan, are you listening? Claire's voice cut through my thoughts. She was adjusting her blazer in the hallway mirror, preparing for another day of being important. Mason is coming by tonight to discuss the security system for the office. Mason Hart, Claire's wellness consultant, former personal trainer who now calls himself an entrepreneur. The kind of guy who wears designer athleisure to business meetings and calls it authentic branding. Of course, I said. Should I pick up some protein powder for our guest? Claire shot me a look. He's helping us expand into the fitness market. This is serious business. Oh, I'm sure it is. Mason had been circling our lives for 6 months now, ever since Claire hired him as a consultant. 35 years old, all jaw and abs and motivational hashtags. The kind of man who calls women queens and thinks it's profound. The kind of man my wife apparently finds fascinating. I'd watched them at dinner parties, the way Claire laughed at his jokes about optimizing human potential. I'd seen how she touched his arm when he explained his revolutionary approach to wellness integration. I'd noticed how she always seemed to need his input on decisions she used to make alone. But I'm a patient man, and patient men see everything. My phone buzzed. Will Henderson, my lawyer and oldest friend, was calling. Ethan, we need to talk. Claire's counsel wants to renegotiate the prenup terms, urgently. I smiled, watching Claire check her lipstick one final time. How urgently? They're requesting a meeting this week. Something about evolving business interests and asset protection strategies. Claire grabbed her keys, kissed my cheek with the warmth of a business handshake, and headed for the door. Don't wait up tonight. The Mason meeting might run late. I'm sure it will. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Max looked up at me from his bed, tail wagging hopefully. What do you think, boy? Should we let the games begin? Claire's product launch party was held at the Meridian Hotel, all glass and chrome and people who thought networking was a personality trait. I wore my best suit and my most supportive smile, playing the role of devoted husband while Claire worked the room like a politician at a fundraiser. Ladies and gentlemen, Claire announced from the small stage, Wellness Dynamics is proud to introduce our new fitness partnership program, developed in collaboration with Heart Fitness Solutions. Mason stepped up beside her, all teeth and confidence. He was wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and he knew it. The crowd applauded politely, while I calculated how much of our joint account had paid for this little show. This partnership represents the future of holistic wellness, Mason said, his voice carrying that practiced motivational speaker cadence. When Claire approached me about revolutionizing the industry, I knew we had something special. I bet you did, I thought, sipping my overpriced champagne. The presentation continued with slides about synergistic wellness ecosystems and integrated lifestyle solutions. Corporate buzzword bingo at its finest. But I wasn't really listening to the words. I was watching body language, noting glances, cataloging the small intimacies that people think nobody notices. The way Claire's hand lingered on Mason's shoulder when she passed him the microphone. The way he looked at her when he thought nobody was watching. The way they both seemed to forget I existed whenever they were in the same room. After the formal presentation, I mingled dutifully, shaking hands with investors and nodding along to conversations about market disruption and growth potential. Mrs. Kranz, our neighbor who somehow always ended up at these events, cornered me near the bar. Your wife is so accomplished, Ethan. You must be very proud. Absolutely, Claire's always been ambitious, and that Mason fellow seems very involved in the business. Kranz had the gossip radar of a CIA operative. Nothing happened in our social circle without her knowing about it within 24 hours. He's a consultant, I said carefully. Oh, I'm sure he is. She sipped her wine with the satisfaction of someone who knew exactly what she was implying. It's wonderful when spouses support each other's professional relationships. I excused myself and went looking for Claire, but she was nowhere to be found. Neither was Mason. I checked the main ballroom, the networking lounge, even the hotel restaurant. Finally, I asked the concierge if he'd seen them. I believe they stepped out for some air, sir. The rooftop terrace is quite popular this evening. The rooftop terrace, how romantic. I took the elevator up, my mind racing through possibilities. Maybe they were discussing business. Maybe Mason was having a panic attack about public speaking. Maybe they were planning a surprise for me. Maybe I was an idiot. I found them at the far end of the terrace, partially hidden behind a decorative screen. They weren't discussing business. Mason had Claire pressed against the railing, his hands tangled in her hair, her arms wrapped around his neck like she was drowning, and he was the only life preserver in the ocean. I stood there for a moment, watching my wife kiss another man with a passion I hadn't seen from her in years. Part of me wanted to storm over there, make a scene, demand explanations, but a bigger part of me was already calculating angles, considering options, planning my next move. I pulled out my phone and took a few photos. Not for evidence, that would be too simple, for motivation. Then I went back to the party and played the perfect husband for another 2 hours, making small talk and accepting congratulations on Claire's success while my wife was upstairs planning our destruction. When Claire finally returned, her lipstick was gone and her hair was slightly mussed. She claimed she'd been networking with potential investors. Mason appeared 20 minutes later, straightening his tie and talking loudly about the incredible view from the terrace. How was the fresh air? I asked Claire as we drove home. Refreshing, she said, not meeting my eyes. Very refreshing. The next morning, I called Will. I need you to review our prenup again. Every clause, every contingency, every loophole. Ethan, what's going on? Let's just say I want to make sure I understand all my options. Will had been my roommate in college and my lawyer for the past 15 years. He knew me well enough to hear the edge in my voice. Should I be worried? I thought about Claire's hands and Mason's hair, about the way she'd lied to my face, about the prenup she'd insisted on to protect herself from me. Not yet, I said, but soon. The prenup Claire had demanded was a work of art, 47 pages of legal protection designed to ensure that if our marriage failed, she'd keep everything she'd built and I'd walk away with whatever scraps she felt generous enough to leave me. What Claire hadn't realized was that I'd helped write it. While she focused on protecting her wellness empire, I'd been quietly building something much bigger. Drake Logistics wasn't just a small software company anymore. It was a multi-million-dollar operation, with contracts spanning 3 continents. But on paper, thanks to some creative accounting and strategic partnerships, it looked like a modest side business, barely worth mentioning in divorce proceedings. The prenup protected Claire's assets from me. It didn't protect her from herself. This is brilliant, Will said, spreading the documents across his conference table. Absolutely brilliant and completely legal. I learned from the best, I said. Claire taught me the importance of asset protection. The beauty of the prenup was in its assumptions. It assumed Claire would always be the primary breadwinner. It assumed my business would remain small and dependent on hers. It assumed I would always need her more than she needed me. It assumed wrong. So what's the plan? Will asked. Phase 1, documentation. I want everything recorded, every meeting, every lie, every betrayal. And Phase 2, I smiled. Phase 2 is where things get interesting. That evening, Mason came over for another business meeting. I greeted him at the door with my usual friendly demeanor, offering him a beer and asking about his workout routine. He launched into a detailed explanation of his new training philosophy, while I nodded and made mental notes about his ego. The key is optimization, he said, flexing unconsciously as he talked. Most people settle for mediocre results because they don't push themselves to the next level. Fascinating. And this applies to business too? Absolutely. That's why Claire and I work so well together. We both understand what it takes to dominate a market. Dominate. Interesting word choice. Claire appeared in her home office outfit, yoga pants, and a silk blouse that somehow managed to look both professional and inviting. She kissed my cheek again, that same cold peck that had become her signature gesture of marital obligation. "We'll be working late tonight," she said. "Don't wait up." "Oh, of course not. I know how important this partnership is to you." They disappeared into her office and closed the door. I waited exactly 30 minutes, then activated the security system I'd installed 6 months earlier. Claire thought it was for protection against burglars. She was half right. The audio came through crystal clear on my laptop. Mason's voice, low and intimate. "God, I've been thinking about you all day." Claire's laugh, breathy and eager. "We have to be careful. Ethan might hear." Ethan's clueless. Guy spends all day playing with spreadsheets while his wife builds an empire. He's not that bad. "Please, when's the last time he made you feel like this?" I didn't need to hear the rest. I had what I needed. The next morning, I called Claire's biggest investor, Richard Pemberton, and invited him to lunch. Pemberton was old school business, the kind of man who still believed in handshake deals and personal integrity. He'd put $2 million into wellness dynamics based on his faith in Claire's character. "Ethan, good to see you. How's the logistics business?" "Growing steadily. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about Claire's new partnership. Heart Fitness Solutions? Interesting expansion into the fitness market." "Very interesting. I assume you've done your due diligence on Mason Hart?" Pemberton's expression shifted slightly. "Of course. Why do you ask?" "Oh, no particular reason. I just know how important reputation is in the wellness industry, especially when personal and professional relationships get complicated." I let the implication hang in the air while Pemberton processed what I wasn't quite saying. "Is there something specific you think I should know?" "I'm sure you'll figure it out. You didn't build your fortune by missing the obvious." 2 days later, Mason's car was vandalized in the parking lot of his gym. Someone had poured protein powder all over the interior and spray-painted "Homewrecker" across the hood in bright red letters. The whole thing was captured on the gym's security cameras and somehow ended up on Mason's own Instagram story, where his 50,000 followers got to see his humiliation in real time. Mason was furious, ranting about jealous competitors and business sabotage. Claire was sympathetic, offering to help him file a police report. I was supportive and concerned, suggesting we increase security around our own property. "It's probably just some random vandal," I said over dinner, "but you can never be too careful these days." "This is serious, Ethan," Claire said. "Someone is targeting Mason specifically." "Why would anyone target Mason? He seems like such a nice guy." The look Claire gave me was sharp enough to cut glass. But she didn't say anything. She couldn't say anything, because that would require admitting why she was so invested in Mason's well-being. That weekend, I ran into Mrs. Kranz at the grocery store. She was practically vibrating with gossip. "Did you hear about that trainer fellow, the one who works with your wife? The car incident. Terrible thing." "Oh, that's not the half of it. My friend Linda was at the country club yesterday, and she overheard the most interesting conversation between Mason and some woman. Apparently, he's been bragging about his business relationships with married clients. How unfortunate. Linda said he was quite explicit about the benefits of working with lonely housewives." Mrs. Kranz delivered this information with the satisfaction of someone who just solved a particularly challenging crossword puzzle. I made appropriate shocked noises while internally applauding her investigative skills. By Monday morning, the story had spread through our entire social circle. Mason's reputation as a professional wellness consultant was rapidly transforming into something much less respectable. Claire was getting pitying looks at the coffee shop and concerned calls from friends who thought she should be careful about her association with that trainer. The beautiful thing about social destruction is that once it starts, it feeds on itself. Every rumor spawns 3 more. Every whisper becomes a shout. Every friend who offers concerned advice is really just spreading the poison a little further. Claire tried to defend Mason, which only made things worse. The more she protested his innocence, the more people assumed she had personal reasons for protecting him. The more she insisted their relationship was purely professional, the more obvious it became that it wasn't. "This is getting out of hand," she said after a particularly awkward encounter at the bank. "People are starting to talk." "About what?" You know what? I looked at her with my most innocent expression. I'm sure it will all blow over. These things usually do. But it wasn't going to blow over, because I was just getting started. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday night at Skyline, the rooftop bar where Claire and Mason thought they were being discreet. I'd been tracking their movements for weeks, learning their patterns, understanding their routines. They met there every Tuesday at 9, always requesting the corner table with the view of the city lights. I arrived at 8:30 and positioned myself at the bar where I could watch their table while appearing to be just another businessman unwinding after a long day. When they walked in together, Mason's hand on the small of Claire's back, I felt a surge of something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite satisfaction. It was anticipation. They ordered their usual drinks, Claire's gin and tonic, Mason's craft beer, and settled into their familiar routine of pretending to discuss business.
I saw her get in. I saw everything.
Let me explain.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
While their bodies told a completely different story. Claire leaned across the table, her fingers tracing patterns on Mason's forearm. Mason's eyes never left her face, drinking in every word like it was the most fascinating conversation in human history. I finished my whiskey and walked over to their table. Well, this is a pleasant surprise. Claire's face went white. Mason straightened in his chair, his jaw tightening with that particular brand of masculine aggression that men like him mistake for confidence. Ethan, Claire managed. What are you doing here? Business dinner, I said, pulling up a chair without being invited. You know how it is. Sometimes you have to meet clients in neutral territory. We were just finishing up, Mason said, his voice carrying a warning that might have intimidated someone who cared about his opinion. Oh, don't let me interrupt. I love hearing about wellness dynamics and synergistic partnerships. It's such fascinating work. Claire's hand was still on Mason's arm, but now it looked less like affection and more like she was trying to keep him from doing something stupid. Actually, I continued, I've been learning a lot about the wellness industry lately. Did you know that personal trainers have one of the highest rates of professional misconduct complaints? Something about the intimate nature of the work, I suppose. Mason's face flushed red. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Just making conversation. Although I did hear an interesting story about a trainer who got a little too personal with his married clients. Apparently, he was quite brazen about it, bragging at the country club, talking about the benefits of working with lonely housewives. Claire's voice was sharp. Don't! But Mason was already standing, his chair scraping against the floor. Several other patrons turned to look at us, sensing the tension in the air like animals before a storm. You think you're so smart, Mason said, leaning over the table. Sitting at home playing with your little computer business while real men handle real work. I stayed seated, perfectly calm. Real work, is that what you call it? At least I don't hide behind spreadsheets and lawyers. At least I'm not afraid to take what I want. And what exactly do you want, Mason? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Mason looked at Claire, then back at me, his face cycling through emotions too quickly to track. Anger, fear, desperation, and something that might have been shame. I want, he started, then stopped. Go ahead, I said. Tell everyone what you want. Tell them about your business relationship with my wife. Tell them about your synergistic partnership. Tell them about all those late-night strategy sessions. Claire was gripping Mason's arm now, her knuckles white with tension. Around us, the other patrons had given up any pretense of minding their own business. We were the evening's entertainment. You don't know anything, Mason said, but his voice had lost its edge. I know enough. I know about the Tuesday night meetings. I know about the rooftop terrace at the Meridian. I know about the protein powder in your car, and the spray paint and the rumors that somehow keep spreading no matter how much you deny them. Mason's face went from red to pale in the span of a heartbeat. It was you. I have no idea what you're talking about. The car, the rumors, all of it. You've been sabotaging me. I stood up slowly, straightening my jacket with deliberate care. Mason, I think you're giving me too much credit. I'm just a guy who plays with spreadsheets, remember? What could I possibly do to someone like you? The answer was written all over his face. Everything. I could do everything. This isn't over, he said, but it sounded more like a plea than a threat. You're absolutely right, it's not. I turned to Claire, who was staring at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Enjoy the rest of your business meeting, honey. Don't wait up for me tonight. I have some calls to make. I left them sitting there in the wreckage of their secret romance, surrounded by witnesses and drowning in the kind of public humiliation that follows people for years. The next morning, I found Claire in the kitchen, staring at her phone with the expression of someone watching their world collapse in real time. "Bad news?" I asked, pouring myself coffee with theatrical concern. "Richard Pemberton is pulling his investment." "That's unfortunate. Did he say why?" "He's concerned about the company's direction, about my judgment." "Your judgment seems fine to me." Claire looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been the woman I'd married 5 years ago, before the ambition consumed her, before Mason Hart entered our lives, before she decided I wasn't worth being faithful to. "Ethan," she said quietly, "we need to talk." "Of course. What would you like to talk about?" But before she could answer, my phone rang. Will's name appeared on the screen. "I should take this," I said. "It might be important." "Ethan, we have a problem." Will's voice was tight with urgency. "Claire's lawyer is filing for emergency divorce proceedings. They're claiming mental cruelty and business interference." I looked at Claire, who was still staring at her phone, probably reading the same legal documents that Will was describing. "How quickly can we respond?" "I can have our counterfiling ready by this afternoon." "But Ethan, they're going after everything. The house, the business, even your personal assets." I smiled, watching Claire's face as she realized that her nuclear option was about to backfire spectacularly. "Let them try," I said. "It's time they learned what real asset protection looks like." The storm hit on a Thursday night in November, the kind of weather that makes smart people stay inside and lock their doors. But Claire, Mason, and Jade weren't feeling particularly smart anymore. They were feeling desperate. I was in my home office, reviewing the final divorce papers that would leave Claire with exactly what she'd tried to leave me with, nothing, when the security system chimed. 3 figures were approaching the front door through the rain, moving with the kind of purpose that meant trouble. I activated the smart home's defensive protocols and waited. The doorbell rang once, then twice. Then came the pounding. "Ethan, open the door. We need to talk." Claire's voice, sharp with panic and rage. I opened the door slowly, taking in the sight of my wife and her allies dripping on my doorstep like refugees from their own bad decisions. Claire looked haggard, her usually perfect hair plastered to her head by the rain. Mason stood behind her, his designer athleisure soaked through, his confidence finally starting to crack. And Jade, Claire's best friend and co-conspirator, was clutching a briefcase like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Come in," I said pleasantly. "You're getting soaked." They filed into the foyer, leaving puddles on the marble floor. I closed the door behind them and activated the lock system, not to trap them, but to ensure our conversation wouldn't be interrupted. "We know what you've been doing," Claire said without preamble. "I've been doing a lot of things. Could you be more specific?" "The sabotage, the rumors, the financial manipulation, all of it." I gestured toward the living room. "Why don't we sit down? This sounds like it might take a while." "We're not here to chat, Ethan." Mason stepped forward, trying to reclaim some of his lost authority. "We're here to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" Jade opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. "We have evidence of your corporate espionage, your harassment campaign, and your illegal surveillance. Enough to destroy you in court and put you in prison." I examined the papers with genuine curiosity. "This is impressive work, very thorough, very creative, also completely fabricated." "The judge won't see it that way," Claire said. "Won't he?" I walked to the entertainment center and picked up a remote control. "You know, I've always loved technology. The way it captures moments, preserves memories, reveals truth." I pressed a button, and the wall-mounted television came to life. But instead of cable news or streaming services, it showed security footage from my own home. Claire and Mason in my kitchen 6 months ago, their conversation crystal clear through the hidden microphones I'd installed. "God, I hate lying to him." Claire's voice filled the room. "It won't be much longer," Mason replied. "Once we get the business partnership established and the assets transferred, we can make our move." "What if he fights the divorce?" "He won't. Guys like Ethan don't fight. They just roll over and accept whatever scraps they're thrown." Present-day Claire was staring at the screen in horror. "You recorded us, in your own home." "My own home," I agreed, "where I'm legally entitled to record whatever I want." I clicked to the next video. Jade and Mason at a coffee shop, planning their frame-up strategy. "The key is making it look like he snapped," Jade was saying. "Corporate guys like him, they can't handle real confrontation. Push him hard enough, and he'll do something stupid we can use against him. What if he doesn't take the bait? Mason asked. Then we manufacture something. A few bruises, a torn shirt, some witnesses who saw him lose control. I turned off the television and looked at my 3 visitors, who were standing frozen in the middle of my living room like deer caught in headlights. The interesting thing about manufacturing evidence, I said conversationally, is that it requires you to admit your real plans out loud. And when you do that in public places, well, sometimes people overhear. Sometimes they record things. Sometimes they share those recordings with lawyers and journalists and social media influencers. Claire sank onto the couch, her face pale. How long have you known? About the affair? Since the launch party. About the financial scheme. Since you tried to renegotiate the prenup. About the frame-up? Since last Tuesday, when Jade tried to seduce me at the Starbucks on 5th Street. Jade's face went crimson. That was you trying to get me into a compromising position so Mason could burst in with his phone camera and create your evidence. Except I was recording too, and my equipment is much better than yours. I walked to the window and looked out at the storm. Lightning illuminated the neighborhood, and I could see Mrs. Kranz peering through her curtains with undisguised fascination. By tomorrow morning, the whole street would know that something dramatic had happened at the Drake house. So here's what's going to happen, I said, turning back to face them. Claire, you're going to sign the divorce papers exactly as they're written. You'll take what the prenup allows you to take, which is essentially nothing, and you'll disappear from my life forever. And if I don't, then I release everything, the recordings, the financial records, the evidence of your attempted fraud. Your reputation, your business, your entire life becomes a cautionary tale about what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. Mason tried one last desperate play. You can't prove anything. It's all circumstantial. Mason, you sweet, stupid man. I don't need to prove anything in court. I just need to prove it in the court of public opinion. And in that court, perception is reality. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text message, then another, then a dozen more in rapid succession. Oh, look at that, I said, checking the screen. It seems like someone leaked some very interesting videos to a few local news outlets, and social media, and YouTube. Amazing how fast information travels these days. Claire's phone was buzzing too, along with Mason's and Jade's. The storm outside was nothing compared to the digital storm that was about to engulf their lives. You destroyed us, Claire whispered. No, I said. You destroyed yourselves. I just made sure everyone could see it happen. Mason made one final, futile attempt to salvage his dignity. He lunged toward me, probably planning to tackle me, or throw a punch, or do something that would make him feel like the alpha male he'd always pretended to be. He slipped on the puddle of rainwater they'd tracked in, and went sliding across the marble floor like a cartoon character. He crashed into the decorative fountain I'd installed in the corner of the foyer, sending water and koi fish flying everywhere, while his phone skittered across the floor, recording his humiliation from a fish's eye view. The front windows lit up with camera flashes as the neighbors gathered to witness Mason Hart's final moment of glory, soaking wet and covered in aquarium gravel, while goldfish flopped around him like a living metaphor for his life choices. I think it's time for you to leave, I said. They gathered their dignity and their soggy belongings and stumbled toward the door. Claire paused at the threshold, looking back at me with something that might have been regret. You know what the funny thing is? I said. If you'd just been honest with me from the beginning, I probably would have given you the divorce without a fight. I might have even been generous with the settlement, but you had to try to destroy me first. Would you really have? I considered the question seriously. We'll never know now, will we? She nodded and walked out into the storm, followed by Mason and Jade. I watched through the window as they climbed into Mason's damaged car, the one with homewrecker still faintly visible under a hasty paint job, and drove away into the night. My phone rang. Will's number. Ethan, what the hell did you do? The entire internet is exploding with videos of your wife and some trainer planning to frame you for assault. Is it really? How interesting. This is going to be the most one-sided divorce in legal history. She'll be lucky if she doesn't face criminal charges. I walked back to the fountain and started fishing koi out of the puddles on the floor. Max appeared from wherever he'd been hiding during the confrontation and began investigating the chaos with typical dog enthusiasm. Will, do me a favor. Draw up papers to donate Claire's settlement to charity. Something appropriate, maybe an organization that helps victims of financial fraud. Ethan, you won. You can afford to be generous now. I thought about that for a moment, holding a confused goldfish in my palm while lightning illuminated the wreckage of my marriage. You know what? You're right. Make it two organizations, one for fraud victims and one that provides legal aid for people going through difficult divorces. That's very noble of you. Not noble, just practical. Turns out, the best protection from betrayal is to be underestimated. My wife learned that the hard way. I hung up the phone and surveyed the damage to my foyer. Water everywhere, fish scattered across the marble, and the lingering scent of expensive perfume and desperation. But for the first time in months, my house felt like home again. Outside, the storm was beginning to clear, and I could see stars appearing between the clouds. Tomorrow, there would be lawyers and reporters, and probably a few more social media videos to deal with. There would be paperwork and settlements and the tedious business of rebuilding a life. But tonight, there was just me and Max and a house full of possibilities. I had won completely, and my enemies had destroyed themselves with their own greed and stupidity. Claire would spend the next decade rebuilding her reputation and her finances. Mason would be lucky to find work as a gym janitor after the footage of his fountain dive went viral. And Jade would discover that being an accessory to attempted fraud wasn't nearly as glamorous as she'd imagined. As for me, I had my freedom, my fortune, and the satisfaction of knowing that justice, real, poetic, devastating justice, had been served exactly as it should be. The CEO's prenup had protected her from me, just like she'd wanted. It just hadn't protected her from herself.